as people know the way I do things, this can get pretty hardy and technical. I got a lot of material to get through here, but some of it has just been so shocking in general. So this is a BC government map of all the pipelines and the stuff in general. It's all under construction. It's busy, busy, busy. Basically, the 6 planned LNG plants are going to need some 50,000 new fracked wells, or to ship the fracked gas off to Asia. These are there are 5 plants known under construction. The 6th one added Prince George, so it comes to 56 million tons of LNG a year. So firstly, I want to look at the BC Energy Regulator, which is in theory in charge of all this stuff. They say we regulate the full life cycle of energy resource activities from site planning to restoration. We ensure that activities are undertaken in a manner that protects public safety and environment, supports reconciliation, conserves energy resources. They're governed by the Energy Resources Activities Act, which makes no mention of the word climate or greenhouse gases anywhere in the act that governs them. They do 4,500 site inspections every year, but they never assessed a single well for its impact on the climate crisis, its cumulative water impacts, or its cumulative health impacts. They said their final compliance rate was 99.81%, as long as they excluded those other factors. Fracking's water use, the next big topic. Each well uses 5 million to 30 million litres of water. Without LNG at the bottom, you'll see the current water use. Then you stack the LNG plants on top. So right now it's about 6 billion litres a year. By 2050, it could be 16 billion litres of water a year. And the Northeast is in red, drought level 4, as Doug said. So this is the fresh water being used by the oil and gas companies, and it increased by 16% just last year before any of the LNG stuff has started. Then we come to fracking's use of sand and its huge climate footprint that no one ever really talks about. But basically, you have to have sand and other additives called proppant to do the hydraulic fracking. So in 2023, the entire Montney in BC and Alberta needed 5,000 tons. That's 245 loads. So the average well needed 245 loads. The entire Montney needed 229,000 truckloads. The average CO2 emissions for an 18-wheeler is 223 tons, and that's not carrying sand, which is the heaviest it comes. That is 51 million tons of CO2 a year. It's just under the entire BC emissions, just on that piece. So then we look at the way fracking is pouring fuel on the climate crisis. Over its lifetime, each well produces 2 billion cubic feet of gas. When burnt, that releases 109,000 tons, 10 wells, 100 million tons, 10,000 wells, 1 billion tons, 50,000 additional tons, 5 billion tons. Compared to USA emissions, the whole America is 6.3 billion tons of emissions per year. So a massive impact of the gas being brought out of the ground due to fracking. The next is that the LNG companies want to use BC Hydro's electricity to cool the fracked gas to minus 160 Celsius to turn it into, quote, the cleanest LNG in the world. And this is, quite frankly, a bit of a brain fart. So they want, the BC government's boasting about the world's cleanest LNG facilities. And the First Nations LNG Alliance is talking about the cleanest in the world. And they want to go electric so that when they treat the gas to cool it, they're not burning it. Sounds good on paper, and you think about this thing. There's the available fracked gas coming to them. There's in brown is the gas they use for cooling, means the liquefied natural gas is being reduced in quantity. When they do liquefaction using BC electricity, they get the entire quantity for export to Asia. So what using electricity does is allow an increased quantity of LNG to be exported. And the use of electricity enables more LNG to be exported, increase climate pollution, but it stops it from showing up on BC's books. It shows up on China's books or Japan's books, not on BC's books. How much electricity? Analysis is like 40,000 gigawatt hours a year. We currently use 60,000 for the entire province for everything. So it's a huge increase for this fracking. equivalent of 8 Site C dams. And they all want to do this within 5 or 6 years. It took like 30 years to get Site C going. And BC Hydro is giving them a special reduced rate as an incentive to do this. The industrial rate is a version of industrial rate called the E-drive rate. So they also want to build a new transmission line, $3 billion transmission line to the northwest, paid for by federal taxpayers, which is all of us, to provide this subsidized hydropower. And this would bolster the northwest. So this is all part of the plan. We have to build this all infrastructure to do this electrification. So if you look at BC LNG's contribution to the climate crisis, this is the current report from the government on Clean BC with our greenhouse gas targets to get to, by 2030, 40% below our current levels. This is on the left, the current emissions from oil and gas. And on the right, when you add the emissions from all the LNG projects, they'll be at least twice as high as the sector's current target. So basically the scope 1 and 2 emissions, which is not counting the emissions when they're burned, comes to an additional 30.3 megatons. But the target is getting it down to 8.6 to 9.3. It just doesn't add up. And here we have the roadmap for the Clean BC, which says establish requirements for net zero plans for the new LNG industry by 2030. And they're talking about a credible path to net zero. And the only thing on the table is just buying carbon offsets, which are extremely dubious. So if we look at the sectoral target of oil and gas is a 29% reduction, which will take it down to 9 megatons. The LNG emissions for scope 1 and 2 only take it up to another 30, bring it up to 39 megatons. Our entire greenhouse gas reduction goal by 2030 for all of the electric vehicles and heat pumps and everything else is 27.9 megatons. And the LNG is going to increase it by 30. It's going to neutralize 100% of the province's climate efforts. All the work being done by the Climate Action Secretariat and everyone else. Total climate pollution, if you add the indirect emissions and the scope 1, 143, comes to 164 megatons a year, more than the entire emissions of Holland coming from the LNG plants. So this was how David Eby expressed this in an interview with Bloomberg 2 weeks ago. He said, we've made some pretty clear commitments around driving down emissions in the province, and we're at the table with them, the LNG industry, about how we can achieve our goals. Eby said about investors. From their perspective, the investors, ensuring that low carbon energy. From our perspective, all the emissions not showing up on BC's books as the main producer. Just staggering that he has the nerve to, maybe he thought he wasn't listening. He thought no one would pay attention to his Bloomberg interview. So this is what it means, basically. It's the elephant in the room. It's all part of Josie Osborne's ministry. She's in charge of the BC Energy Regulator, which it ignores the emissions from the fracking and from the LNG. But we just keep, by electrifying, we keep the emissions off the books and send them off to China or Japan. Economic reality is that oil and gas produces 19% of our emissions. It's only 2% of BC's GDP, 0.5% of our workforce. And yet we're giving them all these subsidies to help it along. A federal grant, waived import tariffs on steel, subsidized electricity, exemption from the carbon tax, deferred PST, and reduced corporate income tax. And this is the price of LNG on the global market. It went through a huge surge when this stuff was getting excited. It's back down to a low level here. So some of these projects, we may be electrifying all this stuff and they never even happen. Let's hope they never happen. This is the Global Outlook report, that basically says that Canada says the first commercial scale plant is slated to start in 2025. However, Canada's expansive ambitions have been thwarted by delays and cost blowouts. Da-di-da-di-da. The wood fibre plant has seen its costs go up from 1.6 billion to 6.8 billion. What do the Conservatives want? They want to eliminate the carbon tax, eliminate the low carbon fuel requirements, eliminate all of BC climate programs, roll back all the climate-ready building codes, and develop nuclear energy, which takes a minimum 20 years and costs twice as much as solar and wind. What do the BC United want? They've got nothing on climate. They say they will immediately cut the provincial carbon tax, eliminate provincial fuel tax, and they make no reference to the climate crisis on their website. Green Party says ban fracking and putting a hold on the wood fibre LNG facility with no details attached. So in conclusion, the BC government wants us to continue giving the LNG high subsidies, to pay for a $3 billion fast-track transmission line in the northwest, to generate a vast amount of new clean electricity, which will enable the LNG companies to export more gas than they would have done otherwise, to enable the LNG companies to claim they're now producing the world's cleanest LNG, to ignore all the health pacts and the water impacts, to create as much climate pollution as they would have done without electrification, to pretend we're all doing a good thing because we're keeping it off BC's books, for a weak LNG market which is totally unaligned with the IPCC's urgent climate goals, approved by the BC Energy Regulator. What can we do? Write to the Minister demanding to know why the energy regulator is being allowed to ignore the climate plans and why keeping it off BC's books is an ethical approach to tackling the climate crisis. Write to the directors of BCER asking why their approvals process ignores the climate impact of the projects they assess. Take BCER to court for blatantly ignoring the government's climate action plans and endangering the health of local people through fracking, and demand a review of the Energy Resources Activities Act, urging that climate pollution be included in light of the government's goals. And with that, I'll hand it back to Brenda. My goodness.